there's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show. Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Alex Lirtsman. He is the co-founder and chief strategist at Ready, Set, Rocket. Alex, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm stoked to chat with you today, Alex. We're going to be talking about the traditional B2B marketing funnel against the more modern thing that I've been hearing a lot of people talking about recently, which is this idea of the customer journey and how do we map the customer's journey. But before we get into that, I'd love for you to explain to our listeners, just give them a little bit of context as far as what you and your team are up to at Ready, Set, Rocket.
So thanks for having me on. We're a full-service digital agency at Ready, Set. We help brands and enterprises figure out how to both connect with their consumer all the way from brand awareness, speaking of a traditional funnel, all the way through how do they stay engaged with a customer and really create a deep relationship with their customers. And so for us, a lot of this is very funnel-based, but it's also based on actual customer research and understanding how does a brand really need to connect to really resonate with a customer through that entire customer journey.
I love it. So Alex, I want to start by talking about the traditional marketing funnel. Explain to our listeners kind of how you think about the traditional marketing funnel, and then we're going to get into why it's necessary for us to kind of evolve our thinking beyond that. But let's start with the marketing funnel itself.
Well, I think the marketing funnel has always been absolutely critical if you can't start driving sales until somebody's aware of your brand. And the traditional marketing funnel always had a prominence of explaining in a really simple way that if you don't have awareness of your brand, it's really hard to drive favorability and then consideration and then finally conversion or sales. So it served two purposes. One is sort of understanding how to frame up even the audiences that you want to talk to. How do you drive them all the way from awareness to sales? But the second thing, which I think drives a ton of value of looking at a traditional marketing funnel, is KPIs that are matched to specific stages of that funnel. So when somebody is talking about why is our social campaign not driving sales, it's an easy thing for a marketer to look at a traditional funnel and say, because a social campaign is probably, or a brand awareness campaign is primarily focused on brand awareness. So if we want to hold that campaign accountable for its success, it probably wouldn't be sales. It probably would be brand mentions or content shares or visitors to our website, whatever sort of our more top of funnel metrics are. And so that was always and still has an incredible place in explaining a framework of how do we drive a consumer all the way from awareness to conversion. And then the second part is, as I mentioned, is assigning KPIs to every single stage of that funnel.
Got it. Talk to us more about assigning KPIs to every stage of that funnel. Can you walk us through some examples maybe of what that could look like?
Yeah. So typically when we're starting out and somebody is not familiar with your brand, a lot of times before you could ask them to purchase something, and especially in the B2B context, they have to be familiar with the brand. They have to at least have heard about your brand before you can ask them to purchase. Most of the time you need multiple touch points. So from an awareness standpoint, how many times has this unique user or this prospect, how many times have they seen our brand in the wild, right? Whether it's been on a display ad, billboard, a shared piece of content, sort of whatever it is, right? And then you're tracking KPIs purely around brand awareness. And so it might be unique visits to our owned properties. It might be content shares. It might be the number of social followers, brand mentions, whatever it is, right? So you need to make sure that somebody at a very high level is at least aware of your brand before you can start start really truly prospecting them. And then from there, as you move on to, okay, this is sort of something that I might have some interest in. And based on the content that I've seen on their website, based on the videos I've seen, based on a newsletter that I'm receiving, whatever it is, I'm starting to think about this brand from a favorable perspective. You still might need to do a level of research and consideration, but at least they're part of your mindset and you have a positive connotation with their brand. So the KPIs that you're starting to track around this are a little bit more engagement focused and things that are driving a bit of favorability. And then from there, typically we think of somebody as moving from favorability. They probably think of your brand favorably, and they're now starting to really do a little bit deeper research and consideration. So for B2B brands, it's a lot of white paper downloads. They're probably doing some demos. They might be jumping on a webinar, might be an online chat. They might be opening up emails, sharing emails, that kind of thing. And that's when they're really sort of deep in this consideration phase. And again, if you're running an email marketing program, you shouldn't be focused on, well, is my email marketing program, which is doing a fantastic job probably in driving consideration, is that email marketing program generating sales? That would probably be a little premature for your email marketing program to be doing that for you. But it can absolutely drive consideration, right? And you should be measuring consideration appropriately, having some primary KPIs or benchmarks that you want to hit that are really focused on consideration before you move into a traditional conversion event. And that traditional conversion event is typically how many form submissions or contact form submissions am I getting? How many phone calls am I getting from the site, right? And so maybe you're using a tracking phone number so you can see all the touch points that led there. But still, along the way, what you're focusing on is, by this point, there have been multiple things that happened along this funnel that have gotten you there, right? And so now you are optimizing your forms towards your KPI of form submission, and that becomes your primary KPI for this last part of the funnel.
I love the idea of having specific KPIs for every part of your funnel, but I want to spend the rest of this interview, Alex, talking about kind of the transformation toward kind of customer journey mapping. Can you talk to us about kind of what are the shortcomings of kind of the traditional funnel and how has that then segued into kind of the importance of customer journey mapping?
So there has been an evolution. Obviously, consumers are more informed because they have greater access to useful information. And so the typical funnel of somebody's going through the motions that I just expressed, that still needs to happen, but it can happen in a much more rapid iteration. It might happen the same day. You're still sort of exposed to the brand and then you're going through this journey, but you're, as a consumer, you're going through that journey at your own pace, right? And so what the funnel does a great job of is it creates a framework. It allows you in an organization explain how a customer first becomes aware all the way down to conversion. But that doesn't really, but the flip side of that, it's about your marketing organization. It's not about the customer, right? So if we're moving away from this age of one-way communication and it's about dialogue and it's about relationships versus leads and it becomes less transactional in nature, the customer journey is sort of this evolution from taking a funnel into really adapting it to how is the customer really engaging with our brand. So forget about my needs as an organization or how I believe he or she should be marketed to. It's about, well, how does this really work for them? And it's very agnostic of my needs as a company, right? And so it's putting that user first. And I think obviously traditional funnel, easy way for businesses to categorize KPIs, align on high-level business objectives. But the cons are it's super oversimplified for true consumer behavior. And purchase behavior is also rarely linear. So the process I walked you through, that's an ideal process when you're having this sort of as a marketing organization, this is how we think. But the focus is still on the business. It's not on the consumer. And the end goal is the purchase and the sale or the transaction. And it's really not focused on sort of what is happening post that lead, right? And so the customer journey really is a way of having an evolution from that and having that focus on a holistic customer lifetime value, or how are you managing that relationship all the way through. It's user-centric in nature, so you could also gain greater insights out of it. And you can focus, as I mentioned, on the user experience, their mindset, their emotions as they navigate the journey.
I love it. Could you walk through maybe an example of either a client of yours, or I'd love to hear a tangible example of the shift from thinking about it only from the traditional funnel perspective into really mapping out a customer journey?
Yeah, so I think this applies to pretty much every single customer that we're engaged with. I think a lot of times where we're brought in, they are trying to solve a challenge or a problem. The challenge is usually impacting a specific part of the funnel, and so the conversation always starts with, we are not getting a lot of times we're just not driving enough leads, right? And so typically the conversation that's had is, okay, if we can only do two things, can we widen the funnel so we can drive more leads through, and can we fix the funnel so it's working harder for us? And where sort of the evolution has come about, one example is we work with a large media company, third largest media company in the US. And so when they came to us, it was their anticipation is we would do two things for them, is we would widen the funnel so they can communicate their value and their offering and their reach to more media buyers, media planners, and then maybe sort of create a program to fix that through marketing automation, things like this. And so what we came back to them with is, well, that's the right thinking, but maybe what we would need to do is sort of understand what the customer actually wants before we introduce our biases. And it's very easy to sit in a boardroom or even as an agency and think that you understand the customer, think that based on some high-level research or insights that you really understand their journey. And so so what we did was we actually broke down that journey of all of the things that need to happen before somebody submits a lead. And so from an analytics perspective, what are all of the pages that were touched before somebody ever submitted a lead? How many times did they actually interact with any of their properties, both website properties, webinars, every single part of their relationship before they became a client? And so coming at this from the user's perspective, from both an analytics and a CRM perspective, joining both identified and unidentified data to say this is what their journey actually looks like before we start tweaking any part of that journey is the most critical piece. And then you're really able to take their mindset in. And I think it's a pivot in mindset more than anything else to sort of think about it from a customer perspective versus from yours. So when I was talking about earlier of all of the pieces of that funnel, if you were to rebuild this as a customer journey, in awareness, we're really focused a lot on content marketing. You might have some tangential searches that have nothing to do with your brand that are driving people to discover your brand. You're thinking about sort of like prospecting campaigns, right? But like those are things that we would never even think about unless we actually took a step back and say, okay, well, for our cohort of leads and relationships that have turned into substantial relationships, what is the process that they went through? And so can we then optimize the journey so that process can be
replicated? Yeah,
so that process can be replicated and highly scalable. And I think sort of this, a lot of times we're thinking about this as, all right, what do we think is the right solution versus thinking about it as like, what has the customer actually demonstrated was the right solution to drive a long-term relationship? And then how do we scale that, optimize and scale that forward?
I love it. Alex, this has been really, really helpful. If there's somebody listening to this, they want to stay connected with you or they want to learn more about Ready, Set, Rocket, what is the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
So I'm Alex at readysetrocket.com, but I will say that based on what we just talked about, we'll put up a quick article that sort of summarizes everything. If you go to b2bjourney.readysetrocket.com, you can see sort of that evolution from a traditional funnel, which as I said, still important, to the customer journey based way of thinking. It's b2bjourney.readysetrocket.com, and then feel free to shoot me an email if you have any questions. Alex at readysetrocket.com.
I love it. Alex, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you'd like to connect with B2B executives from all over the world, make sure to join our private Facebook community. There are some incredible conversations happening inside this group. To join, visit b2bgrowthshow.com/FB.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.